Hello, everybody. This is Jay Onwuka here again on the NearZone channel, and I'm doing something a little bit different than what I had been doing before. So I hope that people will at least come with me as I, add a new project to this channel. This is something that I've wanted to do for a while, and I've debated splitting things up, but I decided kind of not to, at least for now. So let's sort of let me introduce the topic here. What I'm going to be doing is starting a series on new thought, and sort of new thought, new age in general, and I guess broader than that, mysticism kind of as it appears in America, primarily. And by that, I mean, I do want to explore a lot of different, I guess, traditions or origins of these ideas and things, which will obviously take us outside of the United States. But I guess as my core, I'm trying to sort of use the ways that these ideas show up in American society, and then I'm sort of branching out from there. Sorry if my voice is a little bit weak right now. I've got a touch of laryngitis. I'm getting over it, so I could have waited, but I didn't want to wait any longer. I am so let me sort of go back. I'm using notes, I guess I want to say that. So I am going to be a little bit more scattered than I generally am, because I usually read straight from a script. But I do like to do things, straight from the top of my head. So I guess think of this more in like a podcast mode, in that, I am not necessarily going to be straight on target every single step of the way, as far as, every word, or every second of speech, leading up directly to a point. But we're going to get there. So what is New Thought? New Thought is basically, if I had to summarize it, it's the idea that your thoughts or people's thoughts are the backbone of reality, and that by manipulating your thoughts, you can then manipulate reality in a more direct sense than like, I think about the fact that I want a soda, and so then I go out and buy a soda, and now my reality has changed because I have a soda here. That's not really what obviously they mean it in a more like, I able to like conjure a soda out of nothingness, right? And obviously there's levels of this, and that's something that I want to explore, but that's sort of the basic worldview that I'm going to be trying to explore. And this episode is really going to be an introduction to the whole thing. I wrestled a lot with how to sort of approach this. I thought about trying to approach, start off with maybe a foundational text, maybe look into Christian Science or into like Dale Carnegie or Napoleon Hill, and try and tease things out of there. But I had actually been recommended a book, Becoming Supernatural by Joe DiSpenza, because I am, despite the fact that I'm sort of trying to go into this with a critical eye, I do have metaphysical interests and things. So in that, it was lent to me in good faith. The person, I liked the book themselves, I think, and wanted me to read it. And I'm not telling them about this, obviously, and I'm not trying to sort of rip them apart. This isn't really about that. But when I looked over the book, what I found was that it was a pretty good sort of general text as far as what I think of when I think New Thought, New Age, in that its ideas are, it doesn't have like specific sort of out there ideas or a specific path that he is trying to sort of lay out here, right? He's basically just giving you the boilerplate manifest your reality type pitch. So and given that, I just sort of decided, okay, let me at least go through this, and sort of like what I want to do with the whole series, take this instance of a new age New Thought thinker and their work, and then use that as a way to try and explore deeper into this whole field. So just to give a brief overview of the book, Becoming Supernatural, it's by Joe DiSpenza, who is, I guess his first sort of major working and training was as a chiropractor. And if you are sort of familiar with chiropractic and the practice and the sort of the milieu that it swims in, it's very easy for somebody who's in chiropractic to move themselves over into a more new thought, new age direction. He's likely to have picked up a lot of his ideas and terminology from that. One of the things that I want to do with this is, as best as I can, try to dig into the history of these ideas and where people got these ideas, and sort of the wisdom lineage, you might say, of these ideas. I didn't do a real sort of deep dive on this one yet, but I did. I read it. I read the bio, so I tried to draw some things out of that. So what is this book about? Becoming Supernatural. The basic aim is to justify supernatural belief in terms from accepted science. So what he's doing is he's telling you, okay, you can manifest your reality. You can do all of these things with the power of the mind. And you know that you can do these things with the power of the mind because science shows that when this happens to the mind. And, he uses a lot of sort of kind of catchphrases, just ideas that he thinks are really sort of fruitful. Some of these are brainwaves. There's a lot of talk about how different brainwave states are, directly correlative to this and that physical condition. The limbic system, which he pretty exclusively calls the limbic brain, and that's sort of your emotional center. He talks a lot about electromagnetism and quantum physics. And he does this in kind of a scattershot way. If you were thinking of this or looking at this in a sort of primarily where's the grift way, obviously the grift is trying to get people to go to his seminars and to a lesser extent buy his books, but the purpose of the book is to get you to the seminar. That's where the real money is being made by most of these grifter types. So he does show you a couple things or talk through a couple of things, but he always manages to pepper in there, okay, when he's giving you especially the anecdotes of people who succeeded, he will say, and then, they just dedicated themselves to doing the work, which is the work that Joe DiSpenza lays out in his works. So like his specific method of practicing meditation, his specific, way of looking at the world and things like that. They practice that, and then they also make sure to go to the seminars and things as often as possible. And it's really between those two things that allow people to reach that level. That's the method that you get to the level, but then the science is sort of to explain how the level is real and why you may not have noticed it before, basically. Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, I'm trying to investigate New Thought and New Age, and the terms are they kind of refer to the same thing, but kind of not. And there's you're going to find a lot of different ways that people define these, and I find a lot of flipped definitions. So I guess I will just give you the way that I sort of think about this, and again, this might not be corroborated, and maybe I'll have to correct the way that I'm, talking about this in the future to better line up with the general practice. But from what I can see, New Thought, New Age is, like I described earlier, this whole idea about, the mind and thoughts create reality, right? New Age to me is more about making direct spiritual claims, right? So they're saying, all of the universe is spirit, and we need to connect on a spiritual level to things, and things like that. That's more New Age. New Thought is, to me, the broader movement, which is just thoughts make reality. And then sort of, if you see New Age then as the spiritual side, then the more secular side, or the sort of totally secular side, is the self-help movement, which is similarly selling you the idea that, you know, by your effort alone, pretty much, you can change, you know, things around you. The most central principle of all New Thought, from, you know, I guess where it began to, from its New Age sort of side to its self-help sort of side, the central principle is, it is your doing / it is your fault. And as you can sort of, I think, understand out of just the statement itself, that can be incredibly empowering, because it puts everything sort of at your disposal, but it's also damning. So if things don't turn out the way that you wanted them to, it's because you didn't do the things that you needed to make them happen. And I know that people will often give sort of the benefit of the doubt to people who say things like that, because they're like, well, yeah, you do need to, you know, make sure that you work and things like that to get ahead. But I do think that that lets these people off the hook a little bit. And that's one of the things that I want to sort of get into. You see, like, one of the sort of the conundrums about New Thought ideas is that you can very easily see, or you can frame the success of New Thought purveyors as evidence that New Thought is real, right? Because these are people who, in a lot of cases, were going through pretty hard times, you know, not being able to make things work. You know, a lot of times you have a series of jobs that aren't working out, opportunities that fell through, just life circumstances that became more difficult. And then they managed to, through basically the power of words and promises and, you know, personal presence and things like that, build up all of this wealth. So from that perspective, you can see that it's not correct to say point blank that New Thought doesn't work, because somebody who is a believer in that will immediately point to this and this and this guru and say, look, it worked for them. So obviously there is a level to which, you know, if I can get to where they were mentally or whatever, then I can do what they did. So basically I took these thoughts in as I'm going through this book and sort of thinking about how I'm going to attack this broader topic. And it's one that I sort of struggle with, because finding the proper response to something like this is, I think, very difficult, because one of the things you have to understand is that just trying to attack the claims is not enough, right? Because you can say, okay, well, this guru or whatever, he has basically sold everybody a bill of false goods, and you know, whatever wealth he has is basically the wealth that he's taken from other people who believed in him that he lied to, right? And all of those things are true, but they're also sort of not finally true. And that's one of the sort of issues here, is that I'll go into this a little bit later. I'm sort of getting ahead of my notes here, but one of the issues here is that philosophy is always going to beat facts. And I don't mean philosophy in the sense of like the discipline of philosophy. I mean philosophy as a sort of act. Philosophy as in thinking about situations and trying to uncover the whys and wherefores of them, right? No matter what fact somebody gives you, you can always ask a question about it. And in that way, simply pointing out the facts of a situation, I don't think is an effective response. But before I sort of get into the sort of response part of it, I want to first at least go through a little bit of what DiSpenza's method looks like. How he's laying out this information, how, and how he is, basically building a persuasive case here. So what I'm going to do is basically sort of take a look at chapter 3 of the book here. And chapter 3 is titled Tuning In to New Potentials in the Quantum. Now, sort of to start off with the chapter, he pretty much misunderstands quantum physics completely. He equates a quote-unquote quantum field with a quote-unquote unified field, and then claims that this field contains energy and information. After talking about that for a little bit, he introduces that topic, and then he segues a little bit into talking about a sort of a supreme divine intelligence, basically a not God. And this is sort of ordering the universe and things like that. And then he gets off of that in like 2 or 3 paragraphs. And then after a little bit of lead up, he talks about the idea or the phenomenon of wave function collapse. And this basically serves to help him build an analogy for the reader being able to create new possibilities by manipulating their attention. And so basically what he says is that you as a personality are like a point in the quantum unified field, and the sort of everything else is, all of the possibilities that you could inhabit, theoretically, this all makes a sort of a wave, right? And so what he's saying is you can sort of unobserve yourself, I guess, sort of take yourself out of yourself through meditation, and then then you stop becoming your own point, you become the whole wave, and then you can sort of try and choose where to put your attention, and then basically you force this possibility to happen rather than this one, because that's where your observation is, and going by the mechanisms of quantum physics, where you put your observation is the real thing. This is obviously a misunderstanding of how quantum physics works, but I'm just trying to sort of lay out how he explains why he's using quantum physics here. So this sort of ends that subchapter, and then in the next subchapter, over 3 paragraphs, he segues from wave functions to brain waves, and that sort of correlation there, wave functions and brain waves, that's mine. He doesn't say that in the book. He's not that kind of clever. And then he sort of hangs around on brain waves a little bit before moving on, and it goes on like that. So you can see that what he basically does is he introduces these sort of scientific ideas, and then he plays a little bit of distraction. He deliberately misunderstands things, and then he moves on. He never sort of, he doesn't say, okay, you are like a point in the wave function of all your possibilities, and now we're going to sort of sit down for this chapter and explore what that is. No, what he's trying to do is to basically, he's got a couple of ideas in mind that he wants to tell you about. So he starts from the idea, he figures out what science is going to help him get there, he builds up to the thing he wants to tell you, then he discards it and move on to the next one. And that's sort of one of the things that interested me about DiSpenza's approach, because I've read other New Thought things, and been around and seen. I've watched Spirit Science and all of that stuff. So I've seen how a lot of New Age type of people put across their ideas. And one of the things that really interests me about DiSpenza's approach is that he is really, really dedicated to employing scientific findings in his work in the way that I had just described, right? So as I was trying to figure out how I was going to sort of lay this whole concept out, what I wanted to do was try and find these ideas and track down where they first came from in sort of the New Thought, New Age milieu. And so as I was sort of compiling those ideas, I remembered the phrase quantum mysticism, and it's not one that DiSpenza uses. It's sort of one of those phrases that's kind of floating around, right? But I did remember it, and it's basically what, even though DiSpenza doesn't use it because he probably sees it as an insulting term, that's basically what he's doing. So I did a search for that just to sort of see what was out there, and this pretty much led me to the main, I guess, focus of this episode, which is basically trying to problematize the idea of debunking these concepts based on facts. So when I searched quantum mysticism, what I found was a video which is titled "Quantum Mysticism Is Stupid" from the channel Professor Dave Explains. And when I saw this video, it really changed the direction of this particular video, because it put in really stark focus all of the things that I didn't want to do when I was going at these types of idea peddlers, right? And if I was trying to say something that was effective about them, basically the Professor Dave video showed me all of the things that I really shouldn't do. I had realized already before I saw this video that just trying to debunk those claims is not going to be effective. As I sort of said earlier, philosophy will always defeat facts, just because facts are sort of static, and philosophy can always find something in there to ask a question about. And then once you ask that question, then you can sort of you introduce that doubt, and then you can go wherever you want. So just trying to poke holes in that was not really going to work. One of the things that really should have clued anybody in that this tactic isn't going to work is that accurate information about science is freely available. And it's not like these people, there is a level of information control in, cults, high control groups, things like that, who often have sort of alternate ideas about the world. But, they're available enough that anybody who really wanted to know can know, right? People aren't being really shut off from information in a way that would unduly create the conditions for the growth of a cult. It's more that people are attached to the ideas, and they're willing then to leave all of these things aside to, consciously push them away, or consciously, sort of suppress the expression of that knowledge. So they know that so and so in the community is an abuser. It's not that they don't know, internally, but they are committed to acting like that's not the case. That's really, that's really what happens. So my sort of analysis of this method is that if you're just trying to go in there and say, these are the facts of the situation and you have the facts wrong, you're not really talking to the people who are in this. You're not really trying to help them. You're talking past them. And I think that Professor Dave is very well aware of this. I don't think that he respects anybody who's involved in any sort of mystical pursuits. The tone of the video is sneering and arrogant, and very clearly, if you were somebody who was just giving somebody else a chance to sort of explain their side, you would never watch through this video. If you were like a believer of this thing and, you know, maybe trying to broaden your horizons, you would never watch this video because he's directly insulting you the whole way through. He believes that people who are into this are too stupid to be worth consideration. And that's, I think, a dangerous attitude to come at any sort of criticism, especially when you're talking about people who are being victimized by somebody who is able to utilize persuasive and coercive tools in a very effective manner. So, and you know, the sort of caveats or whatever, where, oh well, we're not all rational all the time and all that stuff, that's bullshit. People who say that are just trying to assuage themselves of the guilt for laughing at people who get caught up in these things. So that's, you know, that was something that very much irritated me about the video, and I'll sort of go in to show more why this approach is you know, not appropriate. Now but I do want to sort of, before I go further in on this, I do want to make sure that I say none of this is a defense of DiSpenza or an endorsement of his ideas or anything like that. His ideas are very bad. They're also very obviously bad. And it's not, you know, sort of poking holes in those things. It's not, again, it's beside the point. So let me sort of lay out the more direct reasons why I think this approach falls flat. Here's a before, I guess, you know, as another preamble, I did write down a little bit from that video that sort of, I guess, encapsulates how my approach to this is different from the approach of, like, you know, strictly scientific facts debunkers of supernatural beliefs. In the middle of the video, Dave brings up Deepak Chopra, very well-known New Age writer, who, yeah, I don't, to be honest, my interest has mostly been more historical up until now. So Chopra is somebody I haven't read yet. I am going to read him, I think, very shortly, if not sort of directly after this. But yeah, I know of him, and he's obviously big enough that Dave sort of spent a lot of time, you know, with, you know, sort of going over what Deepak Chopra was doing. And one point he says, okay, I'm going to put up these sort of 5 quotes here, right? And you can, you figure out which one is correct. And so basically he puts up 5 quotes. One of the quotes is an actual Deepak Chopra quote, and the other 4 are ChatGPT generated. And it did take me, like, I had to pause it and sort of read through all of them, but I did get it in one. The correct answer, the one that is a Chopra quote, is attention and intention are the mechanics of manifestation. And the reason that I knew that was correct was that it was the only one that made sense. Now, Dave did not understand what it said because he is not interested. It's not that he couldn't have known. It's a similar sort of thing to what he is, you know, what he doesn't understand about the quote-unquote lack of knowledge by people who believe in quantum mysticism and things like that. It's not that he couldn't have known. He could have looked into it, and he would have probably found it fairly easily. He simply felt it was beneath him to do that, so he didn't. This is, I think, to a lot of people who are familiar with esoteric meditation practice, this is going to be pretty basic stuff, right? And a lot of times when we're talking about manifestation in that sense, we're talking about a spiritual manifestation, So it's not that people are going to nod along and say, yes, this is exactly, what we do. We can manifest things exactly like Chopra is saying. No, but the way of talking about it and the sort of core ideas are recognizable. And that's something that Dave entirely misses. He doesn't understand that people like Deepak Chopra and people like Joe DiSpenza are making specific arguments. They're not talking gibberish that just sounds wacky and interesting. They are making specific claims for specific reasons. All right, so I'm going to grab my other set of notes here because I don't type my notes. I generally handwrite my notes. And I ended up taking notes in two different books here. So I had to get the other one. All right, so I'm just going to go through a couple of instances just to sort of, again, further highlight this. One of the things that Dave likes to do is to see that somebody has used something in an incorrect manner and then sort of break down the bare scientific definitions. One of the first things he does this with is the idea of energy, in the sense of when New Age people talk about places having good energy, trying to send your energy out to people, things like that. And he basically says, this isn't a thing. That's not what energy is. He chooses to, he then lays out sort of the basic definitions of, the basic definition of energy as the capacity to do work. Energy is the capacity to do work. And then he defines work as action done on an object whereby an applied force causes a displacement of that object. Okay. Using those definitions, I can very easily justify a spiritual belief. Now, okay, so first of all, souls are objects, right? Souls are objects. We cannot yet detect them, but they should be thought of as objects. And then spiritual energy is the capacity to apply a spiritual force to cause a spiritual displacement. The spirit is subtle. Again, we can't detect it with our instruments, so we don't experience this in, this is electrical, this is heat, things like that, right? We experience it in productive. If the energy has produced something which we find productive or pleasant, or if it's unproductive or unpleasant, right? So from here you can sort of see that it's possible to just use those definitions and turn them around, right? I'm not trying to say that this sort of argument is like ironclad. That's not the point of this. It's also not what I believe. I'm just trying to point out that simply trying to lay out the facts as if that's going to really affect the conversation, ridiculous, because at any point you can just switch things around and use whatever's been given to you to make your own creation. The fact that you're not willing to do that as a scientist is laudable for a scientist, right? That's what a scientist should do. But it also leaves you open to a different, somebody who is willing to use those facts to tie their, to shape something that's totally unrelated to the facts themselves. They're always going to, be making a soda bottle that's actually a cake. I have soda on my desk here, so that's why I'm using that so often. But, a soda bottle that's actually a cake. You thought you gave them cake and said you gave them cake. You said here's the cake, and they said I want actually soda. I'm gonna make this into what looks like soda, right? The fact that a scientist is not willing to do that in their scientific capacity, laudable. But it's like a boxer fighting somebody who's using leg kicks and stuff. Yeah, the boxer might be really good, but they're not. And nobody's telling the boxer you got to use leg kicks and stuff, because in boxing, that's not what's being played. But by being a boxer, by using boxing, you're leaving yourself open to these things. It doesn't mean you have to change your style because you're doing what you need to do for your thing. It just means that it's not adequate for every situation. Later in the video, Professor Dave claims that people like Deepak Chopra are primarily selling identity. This is not correct. What people like DiSpenza are selling is a solution to suffering, desire, and sin. Very, very simply, they're giving you a total solution. You can, with your mind, create any reality you want. So you never have to suffer from anything. You never have to feel desire or feel deprived of something, because you can always create it. And everything you do will be good because you are in tune with the universe. You are the universe. So what is doing evil, right? That's what he's offering. Again, very legible in the texts if you actually read them and take them seriously. But if you refuse to, you don't understand that. And here's the thing. I'm not saying this, again, this is not a justification, but when you say that somebody is, sort of being persuasive and getting you to believe their quote unquote nonsense. God. Sorry about that. Phone. I'll probably cut some of this stuff out. I should do an edit and all that. So yeah. But yeah, so sorry about that interruption. The thing is that you have to see that if you're saying that you're convincing people, right? You have to think about what would actually be convincing. Just doing magic and stuff, you might think people care about that, and maybe some people do, but in a large part people are not really concerned with that. People want to have enough food. People want to not be crippled by bills and debts and things like that. It's not about doing magic. The fact that you can quote unquote do magic is ancillary to the persuasive force of their claims. Their claims are, where I'm going to do for you, I'm going to show you how to do for yourself what religion can't do, what science can't do, what politics can't do, all of that. That's what they're offering. And to try and criticize what these people are doing without recognizing that is a huge, huge gap in your argument. Because you don't understand what would possibly persuade people to go somewhere. And so you're completely just missing the point that you should be driving at. This next point is just something I noted down as just, again, another place where he doesn't quite understand. He says there's a point where he's quoting Spirit Science, one of my favorite channels, by the way. When I say one of my favorite channels, it's not right. I don't like it because they say like intelligent things I agree with. I like it in the sense that I like the show Ancient Aliens, where it's just all of the most wackadoo concepts with the thinnest like gossamer thread justifications and reasoning. And these people are like on TV like with their real names saying that stuff. Nobody ever comes with me on this, but the Gish Gallop that Spirit Science goes on in the Anunnaki movie, Oh my God! To justify Zechariah Sitchin, who can't read like Sumerian and stuff, but to say that he can, it's a work of art. It's so like gobsmackingly venal. It just oh. Anyway, though. Anyway, all that said, he shows a clip of spirit science, sort of a long clip, and he said, and at the end of it, the spirit science guy says something like, and it might not be as complex a form of life. Crystals might not be as complex a form of life as we are, but they are life. And then Dave cuts in and says, no, crystals are not alive. And again, you have to look at this in like a pantheist, animist type of lens, where to say that all things are alive in the same way that like people and plants and animals are alive is not, not correct. And everybody recognizes that. But they are part of the tapestry of life, like capital L, including all of the precursors and all of the other conditions for life and things like that, right? If you see the whole universe as a connected system, then yeah, you could say crystals are life in some sense. But again, this is the type of thing where it's like, Professor Dave goes on this rant, like sort of listing out the criteria of being alive. But that is not the claim that the guy is making. So it's a totally useless rant to go on. Unless you are, again, as I said at the beginning, he's just sort of preaching to the choir and saying mean stuff so that people who also already think that can go, yeah, Professor Dave, you got him, whoa. There's no real criticism going on here because he doesn't care enough about the subject to criticize it properly. Yeah, again, I mean, I feel like I've sort of laid out the point well enough. So I had some other things. I'm gonna leave them for right now. Again, he doesn't understand why people use stuff like vibration and frequency. It's really the frequency thing. I guess I should talk about this a little bit. The frequency thing, especially, is really it's very interesting that Professor Dave missed this. So vibration. The reason people use vibration is because the whole universe is sometimes thought of in sort of a mystical sense as a vibration, series of vibrations, something like that. In the sense that, that vibration is the sort of atom in the philosophical sense. So like, this would be like a sub-quark, a sub-sub-quark, a sub-sub-sub-quark, and then whatever the equivalent of that for thought, right? The basic stuff of the universe is vibration. Okay, so that's sort of the concept of vibration, right? And then frequency, he basically, Professor Dave goes on and says, frequency is actually, it's just, the number of times that, the peaks travel in a certain amount of time. Frequency is specifically an analog to radio and TV tuning. That's it. It's very simple. And it's kind of like astounding that Professor Dave didn't think, it probably means when you're on the right frequency, they're saying that you're tuned to the right channel. It seems very simple, but again, Professor Dave, too locked in, and his idea about what's going on here is fundamentally wrong. He is saying that they're like pretending to be pro-science by using these ideas. He's saying that like, okay, well, how did quantum mysticism start? Well, people looked at quantum physics, they said, oh, well, this is confusing. And then from there, they were like, well, it's confusing, so it must be magic. I believe in magic, so I could just talk about the confusing thing and say it's magic, and then I'm bada bing, bada boom, right? That is not what's happening. You have to understand that the belief, the claim, that comes first, right? People have been claiming that it's possible to manifest different realities, manifest powers, manifest all types of things since ancient times. Now, I've told you that, a lot of times when people talk about it in spiritual terms, they're not talking about a real manifestation. But there was always an interplay between what sort of non-religiously educated people took from those ideas and what spiritual educated people took from those ideas. And I'm not saying necessarily that people who were not religiously educated were being deceived or being stupid or in any sense. It's really a question of it's a question of education, I think, in what you understand, right? But at the same time, people's colloquial beliefs are going to bleed into what you believe, even as a religious scholar. So there's an extent to where if people in the wider society believe that something is possible, people who are within the religious institutions will continue believing that's possible, and then they will know how to justify that in these specific religious terms. And then on the flip side, there are people who had ideas that were sort of strictly spiritual, and they're teaching these ideas or putting them into like festivals and things like that, and then people are taking those and they're not sort of, they don't see it as necessary to go, oh, hey, so what was all of the backing of that? How real should I be taking this? People simply take these ideas and use them for their own purposes. So when I say that there are, these claims have been made since ancient times, what I mean is that people have both believed things like this for a long time, and also that people have written things that have been taken to, demonstrate a belief in that, whether or not that particular thing was actually talking about a real belief in like an actual, conjuration, actual seeing of a demon that they could touch, things like that, right? It's really important to understand that it is the belief that comes first and then the science. So saying that they are not like understanding, right, is not correct. It's not that they're being pro-science, right? Being pro-science sort of implies that they are they're attuned to science. They care about, the progress of science and what science is going to discover and things like that. Now, let me be clear, Professor Dave does say that they are pretending to be pro-science, but again, he's still misunderstanding what's going on. They are not pretending to align themselves with science. They're saying this is a truth, and this thing that happened in science is evidence of that truth. It's not that they saw that thing and said, "Oh, I don't know exactly what that is, but it sounds like this, so I'll just believe this." No. They had their belief first, and then they said, "Oh, that science thing looks kind of close to what we're doing, so we could probably fold that in." Right? Just like debunking the science is not going to debunk the claim itself, because what's happening is that they're not waiting for science to prove or disprove their beliefs. What they're doing is saying this is true regardless, but a lot of times you just can't see the evidence of it because it's invisible, it's spiritual, yada yada yada. then they see something in science that says, oh, maybe this is where the invisible is breaking through. This is how, people can finally see it, right? So it doesn't matter whether or not it turns out to be real or not. If it's not real, it was like a test, or it was just, something that happens when the spirits are dancing, stuff like that. It never invalidates, because the claim didn't start from a misunderstanding of science. So it's incorrect to do what Professor Dave did and say, these people, found this thing confusing, and because it was confusing, then they decided to justify it for the magic. No. Quantum physics is the basis for quantum mysticism, because popular readings of it, and because the way that it could be constructed could be employed to support the claims that people were already making. There are other sort of sciences and stuff like that. Like, there has been no real big push on sort of understanding like biochemistry, right? There's been no like spiritual gut health thing. People want to have good gut health more now, right? But that's sort of a general wellness thing. It doesn't have specific like, oh, if you get your gut health like this, it's gonna give you powers. People really don't make claims like that, because gut health stuff doesn't in any way even suggest an intertwining with the claims that people are making. But reports of the double slit experiment, reports of like quantum entanglement, stuff like that makes you think, oh, maybe teleportation is possible. Maybe da-da-da. That's why it was quantum physics, because quantum physics itself presented things that were useful. It's not because it was confusing, it's because it was useful. All right, so I'm looking through some other notes here. That was sort of the end of the Professor Dave section. So yeah, I hope I've kind of shown here that his way of approaching this is not the way that should be gone down. So basically what I want to do is to actually look at these claims that people like DiSpenza, people like Deepak Chopra, and so on and so forth are making about the mind and about what's possible in reality and things like that. I would like to trace these ideas back in history, and I'd like to sort of examine the logic that's being used to build them. I think this project is going to take it's going to take a lot of reading, because if somebody's doing this work, I don't know who they are. If you know who they are, please tell me about them so I can read their books and stuff. But there's not a whole lot of like historical, this is the lineage of New Thought, thinking goes, right? There's no sort of tracking back of where the ideas that were folded into quantum mysticism, right, came from necessarily. That stuff it's just not readily available. So to get there, I have to read a bunch of this stuff. And that's part of what this project is about, is helping me get to read more of this stuff, and so I can better understand and talk about it. So to sort of wrap up this episode, I do want to talk a little bit more about what DiSpenza is trying to do as far as the philosophical / metaphysical claims that he's making. One of the things that I found was that this is very much just an ad for the seminars. There's not a whole lot of substance in there, and I understand that that's going to be, something I'll probably say a lot with these types of books, but just really trying to dig down on the claims themselves was not really that rewarding, because again, I can go down the whole rabbit hole of, proving that there's no, the biofield, or whatever doesn't have any of the same properties, even if it's, a real thing. I've seen different sort of, I guess, reporting on a bioelectric field around the person. It's the kind of thing that I don't reflexively believe, but it like maybe it would show that there's like a faint electromagnetic field or something like that. It's possible. Because it's such a weird sort of fringe scientific area, I haven't yet been able to find anything that sort of specifically lays out what it is that I could sort of read really quickly. So it's one of these things where it's like, where did this idea come from, and how is it being used? I want to try and look back and find all of these aspects, and trying to focus on Dispenza's book alone was not that fruitful. But he does make, I would say, two different specific claims that are sort of the root claims of the book, and then everything else is sort of built on top of that. And his claims are that you can heal yourself with the mind, and that you can manifest new realities. Now I know that both of those sound pretty similar. If you can manifest new realities, obviously you can heal yourself. But I split them into two because their justifications are actually fairly different. So the argument for self-healing is basically that mental and physical states often tend to have some relationship to each other. So like if you are emotionally happy, your body is likely to respond in certain ways, especially if it's a certain, kind of situation. Like if it's with somebody that you haven't seen in a while, and you're really tight with them, whatever, you might feel warmth in your chest, warmth in your body, things like that, right? So there is some kind of correlation. Because of that, that must mean that in some way your brain has like full conscious control over everything in your body. It's just dormant, or what, you have to be enlightened to access it, or however they justify it. But basically they're saying that you can basically tell your brain to do something different, and it'll heal itself because it has these self-healing properties. So the reason that I separate this from the argument for the manifestation is because even though there is an aspect, like part of the justification for manifestation is about the brain-body sort of interaction, mind-body interaction, I guess, rather. But most of the argument has to do with reality itself and people's situations, not specifically with just your own body's mechanisms. I gotta flip back a little bit here because I, again, put notes in a bunch of random places. So one of the things I would say probably I need to do more reading and stuff like that, obviously, to sort of properly support this. But on first blush, probably the major reasoning or environmental justification, something like that. I'm not sure of the exact word, but the major basis of the belief in manifestation is the fact that inequality continues to exist in the world. What I mean by that is that we all understand that inequality is bad. It's not desirable. It creates people who are maladjusted on one end and maltreated on the other. And obviously, if we all know this, then it would make sense that we just stop doing it, right? the fact that this doesn't happen needs an explanation. And the explanation that manifestation gives is that the people who are on top are able to manifest things better than people who are on the bottom. And if you want to move up, there's nothing stopping you from moving up, right? There's nothing stopping anything from happening to anyone. You have to be able to manifest to get to that situation. People who are on top have done that. They've taught that to their kids. They live in societies. You know, when you hear about stuff like state of victimhood and things like that, that's basically the mindset that this is coming from, is that, well, we all know inequality is bad. So the fact that it continues means that there must be something innate about inequality. And manifestation allows you to have an answer which is not racial, which is not like nationalistic. It's not tied to a specific, established religion. It solves all of those social problems by simply saying, well, everybody can do it if you learn how to do it. But some people have been doing it successfully and other people haven't. It's also unfalsifiable, so you never have to say, well, this person wasn't doing it right in this particular way, No, you just look and see, did that person succeed? Okay, he manifested right. Did they fail? He manifested wrong. That's all there is to it. And it solves all those problems very, very neatly. I think that's one major thing. Whether it's just seeing inequality, whether it's being on the receiving end, like you're one of the have-nots and you want to move up in the world, you want to get some security, whatever it is, this provides a very neat answer for that. Related to this, it also has an appeal to the observable unexplained, right? And in a lot of ways, this, again, you can see how this ties into the idea of inequality's persistence, because that is something that's observable and something that obviously there is an explanation for, is power and, politics and things like that. But it's an unsatisfying explanation for a lot of people, and this deals with that in a lot better way. But I think what I would say is more pressing, or I guess sort of more neatly or solidly in this category rather than the other one, are things like differences in talent. When one person can, when one person gets laid a lot and somebody else doesn't, right? These types of things, one person having a parent that treated them well, another person not, even though, by all accounts they're pretty similar, they're not acting different or whatever. All of these types of things, again, manifestation it takes care of that beautifully. Oh, is somebody happy? Well, that's because they're manifesting all the things, and when you're happy, you manifest things that are good, and they reinforce that happiness, so you continue to be able to manifest that, and on and on and on, right? Again, related to the first point, but it is, I think, worthy of having a separate observation here. And then one other I would say, important, significant aspect of the argument for manifestation is one of the things that I sort of said way earlier in this episode, which was the fact that philosophy will always beat science. Like I said before, you can't do science good enough to come up with a result that nobody can question. And because of that, people are always going to think that thought is more sort of preeminent. It precedes matter in the sort of reality of things. Again, I'm not saying that that's like strictly true. What I'm saying is that that's how people perceive it. And that's one of the things that allows people to believe stuff like this. And it's again, just like the fact that science, refuses to do any wild speculations on the facts, is one of these things where we understand why there's a gap there, but nevertheless there's a gap, and that gap is exploited. So the fact that you can never really finally pin something down, I think ultimately will lead some people to distrust the certainties of science. It's not that they discount science necessarily, it's just that they think, okay, yeah, but there's more than that, because if it was just science, when you come to me with the right answer, I shouldn't be able to ask any questions. That's not how sort of, minds work. That's not how concepts work and things like that. But that's what people sort of intrinsically believe should be true in a lot of cases. And I hope I've sort of shown that this is not like an unreasonable opinion. Even Professor Dave will admit, look, there's a place where science isn't going to be able to go. If you want to make a philosophical speculation, that's fine, go ahead, but don't claim it's based in science. And I would say the same thing as like a general prescription. I just have to correct and say that's not what's happening here in the case of these people. They're not basing it in the science. They're just saying that science finally agrees. It's more like science has been wrong up until now and they finally caught up than it is like we are basing our ideas in scientific things. You can see the sort of the turn of the Heaven's Gate cult as an example of this. It was never about the comet. Never about the comet. The fact that the comet came about was convenience because they wanted to believe that sort of the end of the world was nearby. But it was never, they weren't like, there's a comet, that must mean that a mothership is coming. And no, they thought that there was like a mothership probably coming already. And then they saw a comet and they were like, oh wow. And it's why they could move from more of an alien-based cult to more of a sort of salvation, Christian-based cult. Because the science was never at the root of it. So that's all I have for right now. I'm not exactly sure of what my next steps are going to be. In my library, I do have... I've got Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've got Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. I've got a couple of other things I think. I may go ahead and just dive into Deepak Chopra just to give myself sort of a broad base in this stuff. But I'll make that decision, at a later time. I hope you guys found this interesting and informative. If you did, hang around, hit the like, subscribe. I do really appreciate it. Yeah. I'll see you later. Hopefully my voice will be better. Peace.